easy go.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be doing a disassembly on my AEG GearBox and basically going over how to figure out and diagnose what the problem would be. I am no way certified on Airosoft tech. I've just watched YouTube videos and taught myself how to take it apart, so I don't have to go and spend money on figuring out for somebody to fix it. So the first step you're going to be doing is make sure that you do not have a battery in, and you do not have a magazine in. That's basically the number one step. Now the second step would be you're going to take this pin right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Focus. This pin right there. It's a screw, and then there's a pin on the other side. Now, some of these may just be a pin, and some of them may not have a screw. And if it's just a pin, you can go ahead and take that pin out. Now, once we get the screw out, sometimes your pin, if you have a pin that's screwed in, your pin may be tight in there, so it may take some effort for it to come out. Then it just pops out on the other side, and then you can just take your gun like this, hold your motor grip, and hold the top receiver about here, and then it should just slide forwards. So then this is your top receiver, and then this is your bottom receiver. This is where all the work's going to be done. We're not going to do any work to the top receiver today. I may do a hop-up video on it another day, so just stay tuned for that. Now the next step is to take your stock, and take your stock, and if you have a stock that has a stock that looks like this, you will have to take this pin out, and it should have a metal piece in it right there that you'll have to pop out. And sometimes you don't have to take that metal piece out for it to come out, but once you get that metal piece out, I'll show you, you will pop this metal piece out. Mine, I don't have to because the metal piece on mine's tiny, but then you'll grab it down here, pull down all the way, and then this will slide all the way off like that. Now if you have one like mine, which is like this, you don't have to take a pin out like this. All you will have to do is put your finger here and pull down. It's easier if you grab your hand like this and pull down all the way, and then this one slides right off. Now the next step is to take a long Phillips head screwdriver, and there's a screw down in there. Let me grab a light real fast. And there is a screw down in there that you have to unscrew to take your buffer tube off. Okay, so there's a screw. You guys can see it. There's a screw down in there. Now you'll have to take that screw out to take your buffer tube off. So you'll just stick your screwdriver in. It's easier if you're doing it standing up like this, and then go counterclockwise to unscrew it. Now normally they should all be Phillips head. When you use your flashlight, you'll have to look and see if it's a flathead. Excuse me. So the next step is you have it unscrewed, but it's just laying here and it won't flop. It won't fall off. So what you're gonna have to do is take your screwdriver that you used to unscrew it, push in here till your screw pops out down here, and you should have a screw, a washer, and then this metal piece which holds this buffer tube on. And then your buffer tube just slides right off. Then you have your sling plate, which just slides right off there once you get your buffer tube off. Now that is how you take your stock and your buffer tube off if you ever have to take it off to change it or to change your plate. Now if that was what you came here to do, you can basically just end the video now, but I'm doing a full disassembly, so let's get right at that. Now the next step is there's a screw right here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a screw right here that you're gonna want to unscrew. And when you unscrew that, that will take your mag release off. So you unscrew this. It's a long-ish screw. It's probably about almost ½ inch. There's your screw, and then this is the mag release button that you put the screw in and you unscrew it. And then you have the spring in here. Camera focus. There's the spring right here. And then if you pick your gun up, this is your mag release, which holds your mag in. And that just flops right out. Now the next step is to take down here your motor cover, and you're going to want to unscrew this screw right here. See, focus. This screw, and then there's a screw down in there. They're both Phillips heads. Sometimes they may be an Allen key to unscrew them, but don't unscrew this one in the middle. That is the one that you use to adjust your motor, which I will get into in another video. So what I like doing is with mine normally stays in, so it doesn't really matter which order you take your screws out in. I normally take mine out from the front to the back, but it's just personal preference on what you want to do. Now right now I have my screws out, but my motor cover stays in. Now what I normally do is just hit it and then it pops out, or it'll pop up so then you can take it off. Now there are 2 wires in here, this black one. So there's this black one, this red one, and then your motor. Now all you are going to do is grab your wires, and all they do is pop right off, and then you'll grab your motor, have it on its side, and then it pops right off. Now all those wires do, this camera would focus, is they connect, there we go. They connect onto here, they're a tiny little flat piece like this. You guys can see that very well, but they connect onto the motor. Okay. Now that is how you take your motor out. So if you're just looking for how to take your motor out, you can just click off this video. But we're doing a whole gearbox disassembly, as I said. That is how you take your motor out. If you ever want to change your motor, or sometimes, here, I'll go through. If you ever have a problem with your gun, you're in the middle of a game and you're shooting, and then you turn it off, you stop shooting to like hide behind cover, and it doesn't shoot when you go out of your cover to shoot again, that will basically, it will either mean your battery's dead. If you have a fuse, your fuse could be blown. But what I seem to have happened to me is when your motor is in here, let's see if I can get mine in here. When your motor is in your motor grip, this, you'll normally have your wires connected, but sometimes your wires will come off. Let's see. your wires will come off of these pieces that they connect onto. Sometimes one will be on, but the other one won't. So then once one comes off, it doesn't send the battery current through it. So that will be what happens if you're shooting your gun, you stop shooting it, and then it doesn't shoot anymore. Now, our next step to taking the motor grip off is there are 4 screws. In mine, there are 4 screws in there. Now, sometimes there may only be 2 screws in there, and if you want to put 4 so your motor grip will stay on more sturdy, and your gearbox housing doesn't have 4 holes on it for your motor grip screws, then you will have to go and buy a different motor grip housing to put 4 screws on. Now once you get all 4 of these screws undone, you will just slide your motor grip off. Okay, now that we have all 4 of our screws off, it's as simple as just holding your bottom receiver and pulling your motor grip off. Now, when it gets to the bottom of your wires, it may be stuck on, so you'll have to move your wires around. So let me see. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that one's stuck because the way they are, they're an L. So they'll get stuck in their hole sometimes. Then you just pop them right off, and that's how you get your motor grip off. Now, if you were like me and you were struggling to get them out, one of my screws fell through. Now, if one of your screws fell through, it's not a big deal as long as you just flip it up like this and shake it. It should fall right out. Now, the next step is going to be taking these 2 pins out. There's a little one right here. Let me see if I can get to that one. There's a little one right here, and then there's a bigger one back here. Now, the easiest way to do this is just take a flathead screwdriver or Phillips head screwdriver and just push on them, and then they seem to pop out easily. Now, you just have to make sure with this little one that these, that these right here, it is, I'm just gonna see that, there are lines in it right there, there are lines in it. Now, you have to make sure that these lines come out of your gearbox housing first, or else when you put your other side, when you putting it, so say your lines are on this side of the gearbox and you're hitting it out this way, it'll get stuck when it gets to this side, because the way they make it is this side of the line. They make the lines a little bit bigger, so hold that in there. But the next step now will be to, what I'll do is I'll put it on halfway between semi-auto and safe, and then this will just, you'll pull it forwards like this, or actually, you'll grab it back here and pop it forwards, and then it pops right out. Now that is how you take the gearbox out of the housing if you have a safety that does not have a screw in it. Now if you have a safety that has an ambidextrous screw or an ambidextrous safety like this, you have to take these 2 Allen screws out, and then that will pop off. Then you can take that out. Okay, now that's how you get your gearbox out. Now there are 1 screw here, a screw in the front, 2 on the bottom right there, then 1 up here, and then 4 on the top. Now if you have a gearbox mine has a quick change spring back here. Now what that means is I can take a 7/32 Allen wrench and change my spring without having to take my gearbox out or take my gearbox apart if I were wanting to get a new spring and change the FPS on the gun. Now, that's how you would take that out, and then you would unscrew all of these screws, and that's how you would get your gearbox apart easily without the spring in it. Now that's how I normally do it, because that's the easiest way to do it if you have a quick change spring. Now if you don't, what you'll have to do is you'll have to have about a medium length screwdriver, and you'll have to stick into this hole right here. Now it won't go in all the way. Sometimes it will, it just depends on how big this nozzle in here is and if it has a hole on the other end. But what you're going to want to do is put this in here and take your screws out. Now it doesn't matter which screw you take out first or what order. You take them out in the beginning, but when you're putting them back together, there is a pattern that you have to go by to put it back together so it goes back together smoothly. Now I personally don't exactly follow that pattern myself. I'll do kind of my own way of doing it, which is basically when you're doing like taking stuff apart and you don't normally have instructions, you'll normally just look up a video on YouTube of how to do it, or you will figure out a way on your own to do it, which is what I've done. I've looked up YouTube videos and then I've figured out how to do it by myself at the same time. Okay, now I am down to my last two screws. I'm taking my second to last one out. So now I have one screw in. Now normally people will leave this top one in and this back one because that is where the majority of the power from the spring is. Now when I do this, like I said, I'll take the spring out and then put it together, or take it apart without the spring in it because it's easier to do it that way. But if you're doing it with your spring in and you cannot take it out, you're gonna put your palm on the screwdriver and hold this over your hand over the gearbox, and then take your screw out. Make sure you're holding pressure on your palm and not as much towards where your fingers are, because your palm is holding downward the spring so your spring doesn't shoot out. Now I can take it off because my spring sits in there tightly, but you'll want to hold this down, take a flathead screwdriver, and down, oops, mine just popped out. But down here, there's a little gap that you're going to want to pry, so then you can pry your gearbox off. Now remember, even once you get that cap off, that spring still has the power in it. And if you're lucky, it'll just pop off like that and stay there and just push the gearbox forward a little bit. But sometimes if you don't have your screwdriver in the spring, your spring will literally shoot all the way across the room. And it will hurt if you get hit by it. Now this is the inside of the gearbox. This is your gearbox housing. Now to take your gearbox apart, one of the easiest ways to do it is Okay, now one of the easiest ways to do it is to just pop this pin off, or not this gear off first, and then set that aside, and then take your anti-reversal switch off. Then you are going to take this spring, or actually you're going to take your piston off there at the shim. Make sure you keep all your shims aligned and where they go, because I can make a whole video on shims. So this is my piston. You just take this out of your cylinder, and then you set that aside. Let's zoom you guys out a little bit. Okay, there you go. And then you're just gonna take your nozzle. You're gonna push back on it, lift up, and then pull it forwards, because there's a spring on it that connects to here and onto here, which holds it down. Now this is your cylinder, and this is your cylinder head. in case you ever, if it ever has a hole or a crack in it. Now mine has a hole in the side because this is a ported cylinder, so make sure if you ever have a ported cylinder or you buy one, that the port in the cylinder goes towards the back, never put it towards the front. Now if you have a ported cylinder, that'll normally mean that, like, my gun is only 368 millimeter barrel. Now if you have like over 400, it'll have a full cylinder in it. Now this is mine, which is a 368, and I put a ported cylinder in it because it gives it a better, kind of makes your gun sound better. It doesn't make it sound as battery powered as you would say. But now you will take this one out right here. This one just pops right out. Then you will pop this one out. That's nope. So I have so many shims everywhere. Just make sure that you keep all your shims in, unless you're going to completely clean your whole entire gearbox and then re-lube it, and then you would have to put a different. You would have to watch another video on how to re-shim your gearbox. Now all you're left is trigger and the trigger assembly. Now, the easiest way to take the trigger out is to take this spring out right here. You guys can see that. And this spring connects from here to here, and then it's tiny little spring. It just pops off. Now you just pull your trigger back like you were shooting your gun. Pull your trigger back, lift up, and then pop it up. Now this is your trigger spring, which makes your trigger so it goes forwards and it's not just flimsy. Now what you have to do, I'm not going to be taking this piece off because this is the safety and this is a super confusing part to take off. Because once you take it off, you have to take your what's it called? This piece over here, which is your select fire switch thing or plate. Okay, I need to put my shims back because they fell off. Now you just take a tiny Phillips head screwdriver, and right here, if I zoom in and show you guys, right here there is a Phillips head screw. Now don't take this one out. See, that's what the shim looks like. Get off there. Don't take this one out, but take this one out. This is the one that holds the trigger assembly in. So you'll unscrew this one, and then if you have a magnetic screwdriver, this one should come off on your screwdriver when it's done, but it's not a very magnetic screw. Here's your screw. Make sure you do not lose your screw, but you'll just basically grab it up here, pull up, and then it will pop right up. Now this is your trigger assembly. Now we're basically done taking the gearbox apart. All we have left is our cutoff lever and our trigger assembly. The cutoff lever is in there, but the trigger assembly is out. Now basically, if you have, I'm not going to go into very much detail about this, but if you have, if you're shooting your gun on just like a normal day playing Airsoft, but then you pull the trigger on semi and it shoots full auto, what it will be is, it'll be this piece. Let's see if I can get this camera to focus. It'll be this piece right here. This L piece. Now this L piece connects to this cutoff lever, which connects over here, so when they sit together like this, that's how they'd sit together. Now what you can do is you can look up a YouTube video on how to fix that problem. I'm not going to get into much detail on that because it's really confusing and hard to describe from my standpoint. But now we're gonna put it back together. what you're gonna do is you're gonna put these two pieces back together if they weren't already together. That's out. Okay, there we go. Now you're gonna take this, and on the bottom corner right here where your red wires are, you're going to take it and you're going to connect it down under here. So right under here, it's like notched up. You're gonna take it, put the bottom corner in first, and make sure that all your holes line up. There's one up here that this pin goes through. If you guys can see that metal pin in the middle of that red, that is where that goes. Then you will take your little screw that we took out of here, and you'll put that one back in. Now, sometimes if you have a magnetic screwdriver, it's easy, but I don't. That fits down there. But it's easy just to put it down there with a tiny pair of needle nose. And then just tighten that down. Just don't strip it out, because that means you'll be doing it too tight. Now what you're going to do is take this bottom red wire right here, and this one goes on the bottom of here, and then it goes down here. Now sometimes there may be a groove. There may be a groove right down here that your wire goes in to stay out of the motor's way. And then this wire goes into this track around this screw hole, and then there's the spot for it right down here. Then your black wire does the other thing on the other side, but it comes out the back, because this black wire is what connects to the battery. Now that is basically how you put the trigger assembly back together. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take this gear, the biggest gear, it's gonna go on this hole. Now the next one you will take is this one, this gear. Now sometimes it may not have this piece on it. It may just have another red or another pin. Just take that and set that on. You have to make sure that your shims are aligned above it. And then make sure, mine's really tricky to put on for some reason. So I will see you guys in a second. Okay, I got that on. My shim is in place. Everything is in order. Now make sure that all of these two gears spin freely. Make sure that this one, these gears are on the bottom, about halfway. Now make sure your shims, ooh, gravy. Make sure that all your shims are aligned perfectly, like so. Now you'll take your anti-reversal switch, which is this piece. Okay, that piece. It's got a spring on it too. You have to make sure that that spring is on it. Now, if you have an HPA gun or an electric gun, but you bought an electric trigger for it, you don't necessarily need to have this anti-reversal switch. This does is it basically just keeps your gears from spinning backwards. But you're gonna put this down in there, hold it down, and hold it down so it's back against this wall right here. And then take this gear and put on that hole right there. Now that's how your gears go back in. Now to put your trigger back in, I normally put my gears in and then put my trigger in. But here's your spring, and if you guys can see it right here, see if I move this back. See this spring right here? Then you'll take it, you're gonna bend your spring up. Bend your spring up. Put the top part right here. This part down in. And then it should, if you do it right, which I didn't. Actually, you may want to take this gear out. Then put your spring on your trigger, and then make sure it's all back and tight. There we go. Then bend it forwards. You have to make sure that this spring stays on it when you put it on. I know this is going to take me a couple tries. It shouldn't be that hard, but I will see. Okay, so I got that in now. You can put this gear back in. Gear goes there. Now, hold your anti-reversal switch down, and then twist this if yours is messed up. Twist it till it's about there. Now you are going to take this spring right here that connects from here to here. Take this and you're just going to connect that. All I'll do is I'll connect it to this front piece first, and then connect it to this back piece. There, and then just hold your trigger down right here on this knob and make sure it moves freely. Now, make sure if you're like me, your wires may keep popping off. If you see me just messing with my wires, that's why I'm doing it. Now you will take these pieces. This piece slides onto here like so. Now you'll take your spring, you'll hook it onto here. And the easiest way that I think of doing this is taking your spring, putting it on here first, holding the spring part down with your thumbnail, and putting the back side in, and then it should all align, and if it aligns perfectly, these should be aligned, and then there's a little track down here that you guys, I don't know if you guys can see, I'll zoom in to see if you guys can see it, but there's a little track right here that connects onto there, which is what keeps all that in line. Now you'll take your piston, slide your piston in, and make sure that the tracks, there's a track on this side and the opposite side, that line up with this. Now, see, messing with my wires again. Just make sure all your wires are aligned. Now that's how you take your gearbox apart, put it back together. But now we actually have to put the covers back on so the gearbox can be finished, and then we will go into putting the rest of the gun together. So now you take your spring and you slide your spring inside the piston. Take your screwdriver that you used to hold it down, put in the back of it again, push it in so that it lines up. Now, this is the tricky part. You'll have to make sure that you hold your spring down, but then grab your other side. Put your finger through this hole, this where you can see your spring, then hold your spring down like so, and then stick it on. Now it will be tight because this piece down here will get stuck between it, but you have to make sure that all of your gears are aligned. You may have to stick a screwdriver through the side to get them all aligned. The trigger may get it messed up. That's how you get it together with the spring in it. Now if you take it apart, if you have a quick change spring, you can leave your spring out and then put your spring in when you get it back together. Now when you have your spring in, you want to make sure that you constantly keep pressure on here, not a tremendous amount, but just enough so that the spring doesn't shoot out. Now what you're going to want to do is take your little screw that goes on the top, put in this top back where the spring is. Now this is how I do it. What they say is to start with one and then go in like a star pattern, like you would be putting a tire on a car. Now once you get this one in, what I do is I'll put these back two in first when I'm doing one that doesn't have a quick change spring. I'll put this one and this one in first, so then it holds the spring down. Okay, now you are going to want to put these in. You can either do it in a star pattern or do it how you want to do it. Now, people on YouTube videos normally tell you don't put them all, don't tighten them all, just put them down and then put them just a little bit tight so it holds it down, but don't completely tighten them. Now, I personally don't really care about that. I just go in and tighten them all down when I put them in. But you can do them on star pattern or however you like. Okay, now that we got those screws back in, you're going to want to make sure that all your screws are tight, and make sure you look down in here that none of your wires are crossing over where the motor goes. Now what you're going to want to do is back out. There we go. Now you're going to take your bottom, hold on, take your bottom receiver or housing for your gearbox. Take it. Now sometimes there may be a flat piece between here that blocks these two sections off, and if that happens, you just have to feed your wire through this top hole instead of the bottom. Now I just put mine through the bottom. Then you'll put your black and red wire that connect to your motor down here where your motor grip goes. Down here. Then grab it, lift it up, put it in so the front end's farther down. Then make sure it's on either semi or halfway. It's easier to do it but on halfway. And then push with some pressure towards the back. You might have to wiggle it a little. Then it goes in, and then flip it to full auto. And then take this pin and put on this side to go through here so you can hold your gearbox in, and then put it back on safe. Now you can take this little pin and put it back in through this side, which it should go back in. It's like pretty easy. Now you're going to take your motor grip and put the red wire through this front hole and the black one through this back. Then you can see there's grooves. I don't think you guys can see this, but there are grooves right here because there are grooves in here, if you guys can see that right there. There are grooves in there, which are where it lines up with your receiver. Now you have to put your 4 screws back in the bottom. Now with these, it doesn't really matter which order you put them in, because there's only 4 of them. Now you can put them in one corner at a time. It doesn't really matter. Those 4 screws in, you're going to want to take your motor, take these wires and put them like this, so your red's towards the front, black's towards the back. Now you may have a red piece on it, or it may say positive. Now if it's red, the red wire goes to it. If it's positive, positive wire goes to it. Now you have to make sure that your spring is on your motor. The easiest way to do this is turn your motor sideways a little bit, or your motor grip, and then work on finagling these wires to the sides, and then to the front and the back, and then your motor should slide in. And then these wires just connect onto those flat pieces, like so. Now your red wire is a little bit longer, so you'll just have to like tuck it into the side. Now you will take your motor grip cover and put back on. Now I personally like doing the front one first and then the back one last, just like I do when I put it or take it apart. Okay, now that you have that back on, you will take your sling plate, slide over your wire, put on onto here. Now you'll take your buffer tube, slide your buffer tube, make sure your wires are straight, and then slide your wire back into your buffer tube, like so. Now you'll take this screw with the metal piece on it. Now this flat side goes towards the side where the wire is, like this. See how the flat side's where the wire is? That leaves room for the wire to go in. Now you may have to use a light to see down in there to see your screw to put it back in. Okay, now that is back on. Now you will take your stock and you will put your stock back on. Now, the easiest way to do this, put it on. Basically reverse the step that you did to take it off, bend this down, and then put it on. No, I don't know what. Now, you may have to fix this screw a little bit if this ever gets loose, like so. Now you will take down the last step, is you'll take your mag drop, put on this side, make sure that this metal piece goes through this metal circle right there. Should just fall right in like so. And flip it over, make sure you're holding, make sure that you're holding your fingers on it, on that side, this side. Then put your spring on. Now this is kind of confusing on how to do it. It's easier to do it if you're like sitting on your leg. But now you will take it, let me zoom you guys in for this part, is you will take it and you're going to take this piece right here, this piece, make sure that your screw is in it, then you're going to sit it on the spring, take your screwdriver onto the screw, and then put the screw onto the piece and then tighten it. And I will get back to you guys when I get this on. Okay, now once you get that back on, make sure it's tight and everything. Make sure it moves freely because sometimes it may get stuck. Now all you have to do is take your upper receiver, slide on. Now there may be a gap, so you'll have to pull back on the charging handle while pushing on the upper receiver so it will get clicked on. Now all you have to do is take your pin, put into this hole, which can be slightly tricky if your receivers are not aligned. You may have to get something to use to push them down on, which is super tricky sometimes. Okay, I don't know why mine is being so stubborn. It's normally, there we go, not hard to get that back on. Okay, now all you have to do is take your screw and put on the hole first, then take your Allen key and just screw this back on till it's tight. And that is a complete disassembly and reassembly of your AEG gearbox. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys go check the link in the description if you want to buy this gun for yourself, or check the other link in the description to go to my channel if you're new here. Make sure you guys subscribe, hit that like button, and I will see you guys in another video.